Welcome to the Bloomberg Quint Virtual Roundtable on Responsible Business, which is powered by Accenture. This roundtable is part of our series on Business Reimagined, Growth Strategies for a Changed World. The world certainly has changed because of this pandemic, and it's changed in so many areas. And in fact, responsible business is also a topic that's come up, particularly in this pandemic, because of the pressures that the pandemic has brought and because of the disruption that the pandemic has wrought upon different kinds of businesses. Responsible business is all about India Incorporated building a future of shared success upon key pillars of innovating for societal good. Now, this could take various forms. It could take something as simple as reskilling individuals from economically weaker sections, using technology to build sustainable businesses, building sustainable roadmaps, ESG, etc., collaborating strategically with partners to drive meaningful change and empowering employees to not just create shared success for stakeholders, but making a real difference in society, especially at times like this during the pandemic where many people have helped each other. And of course, there is certainly the key element of doing business responsibly, legally, and with integrity, which is at the heart of responsible business. And finally, there is also the need to encourage a mindset to responsible buying, to build supply chains that are more sustainable and inclusive. And to help us do that today, we have two eminent figures here today. First up, we have Mr. Bhaskar Butt, who's a legendary figure in Indian business. In 1983, he joined the Tata Watch Project, which later became Titan Watches. And for me, it's a company that's very dear because I collect watches, and Titan is the company that really put India on the map when it came to watches. He was managing director of Titan till 2019. He's on the boards of multiple firms, including the Tata Group holding company, Tata Sons. Next up, we have Professor Himanshu Rai, who is the director of IIM Indore. And under his leadership, IIM Indore has got the Triple Crown accreditation of AMBA, AACSB, and ICWIS, making it one of the top 100 institutions in the world to have this honor. His book, Negotiation, published by McGraw-Hill Education, is a bestseller, and so are his TED Talks. And especially his TED Talks on leadership from the Vedas have won him several accolades the world over. He is also on the boards of multiple companies and advises multiple boards, and is somebody who's really looked up to in the Indian management scene. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here today and for joining this panel on responsible business. First up, I wanted to really begin by really defining what responsible business is all about. Because, in India, this is so crucial because we have so many grays in India. Black is not black, white is not white. So from that perspective, I wanted to start out, how to really define responsible businesses from the context of various stakeholders. Mr. Butt, if I would love to have you start off this discussion.
Well, I think the definition part of responsible business is not something one has actually thought about an accurate definition. But from experience and from the way we have conducted ourselves across the country, not just as a company, one can pick out a few things because, the responsible part is obviously what we're talking about, but the business part is also part of this phrase, responsible business. Finally, business we are conducting for the sake of profits, for the sake of creating value. And it starts by first saying that it's not only profits, but it's not as simple as that. It is about responsibility towards stakeholders. I think you brought it up, stakeholders. Now, the problem with this is that stakeholder expectations change over a period of time, but the core, which is human values, is on the one hand, and on the other hand, nature, which is planet. Those, in a way, are constant, as in, that a tree or a leaf will turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. That doesn't change irrespective of the laws of the land. Okay. And truth, honesty, fairness, these don't change between human beings. So at the core is what is, because sometimes one feels that responsible business means following the laws of the land. That is not alone what I mean. It is beyond compliance. It's not mere compliance. Now, what that encompasses changes all the time. Now, I think in a minute, I'll just summarize. If you were to take the last 14 months, COVID, now there are companies which have benefited from COVID because of the business they are in. And there are companies which have got struck like by lightning almost because of COVID. And if you take companies in the travel and tourism business and hospitality businesses, etc. Now, many have stepped forward to help during COVID. Because of what reason, I don't know. But those who have been struck by lightning and have still not changed their, if I were to take one example of the hospitality industry, certainly the Taj Group has lost a lot of money during the year, but it has gone out and fed a whole lot of people in Bombay, has created a whole wing for looking after. Now, that doesn't change with business prospects, with business performance. So it's just an example, and there are many companies which have done this. So I would say from this, whether a definition can evolve, but at the core it is something which is very basic, about serving humanity and serving nature, respecting humanity and respecting nature, not just following the laws of the land. That's how I see it.
So, Professor Rai, I want to throw this question to you too. You're an academic. You look at things from the perspective of data, research, etc. So, how do you see what responsible business means? Is there a sort of framework that you would have in mind that you would explain this concept in?
So, Ivor, I think Bhaskar has done it beautifully by actually outlining the different components of what a responsible business ought to look like. To me, if I were to provide a precise definition, like what is expected out of an academic, responsible business is about adding value. And who do you add value to? You add value to your stakeholders. You add value to your community, to the community that you work in or you run your business in. You add value to the environment, you add value to the nation, and you add value to the universe. So to me, responsible business is something that adds value to each of these components, and with the end result in mind, which is not related to business, but is related to creating an inclusive and equitable world. For example, as a business institution, most of the business institutions have been looking at, as a part of their mission statements and their vision, to provide good managerial education. But I think that entire paradigm has to now shift. And the mission of a business institution has to be to create responsible leaders who will make those kind of decisions. For example, as a part of our curriculum, we created something called a rural engagement program. Now, let's wrap our heads around this. 833 million people in India live in rural areas. Wrap your head around that number, 833 million. That's more than the entire population of the United States of America and Europe combined. Now, the kind of problems that they face are very, very different from the kind of problems that people in urban areas face. And therefore, as a business institution, is it my responsibility to look after them? My answer is yes. And I think that is what responsibility is all about, that you don't look merely at providing managerial education, but you aim at providing leadership that will also solve the problems of those people. So at IIM Indore, what we do is all our students, without exception, All our students have to go and spend 1 week living in the villages of India. They don't live on the outskirts of the villages in a city or something. They live in the villages of India. They try to find out their problems, and then they suggest solutions with the help of the local administration. And then we ensure that even after they come back, we work with the local government and we work with the administration to make sure that those solutions are independent and those solutions are implemented and independently assessed subsequently. So to me, this is what responsibility is all about.
I think very well put, sir, as a true academic. Uh, Mr. Butt brought this up, the COVID example, and of course, the pandemic is surrounds us today, right? We still don't have light at the end of the tunnel. We seem to have it maybe a couple of months ago. We still might have it, but then nobody is very sure now. And especially this this point that you brought up, Professor Rai, of 800 million plus people living in rural India, and they of course have borne the brunt of this pandemic, especially on the healthcare front, right? Now, why therefore is responsible business more important than ever before, especially in the light of this pandemic and the massive disruption that this pandemic has caused, and of course, hopefully the emerging post-COVID new normal? What would you say to that?
So this is a very interesting question, Ivor, because there's a dichotomy here. When COVID came and hit everyone, the first reaction was that we are all in it together. COVID does not discriminate between the poor and the rich. It's going to hit all of us, which is true. COVID will hit all of us. COVID did hit all of us. But the rich, or people who have the resources, will always have something to fall back upon, will always be in a better situation to defend themselves and also take care of the aftermath. So for example, if at all a person who has certain resources in terms of a slight bank balance, etc., if he or she does not have a job for 2 or 3 months, it really does not matter because you have a slight egg nest over there. But then recall those images of those migrant laborers, because I haven't been able to forget that. Now, those migrant labor who were going back to the places that they came from because they did not have a job, clearly indicated that COVID hit all of us differently. I'm not talking about the disease, but I'm talking about the aftermath of the pandemic, and it continues to be so. And therefore, one of the lessons that COVID taught us was that we need to look at people around us, and it is our responsibility to make sure that those who come from disadvantaged sections of the society are taken care of, because if we don't take care of them, then this country might fail. And I'm not talking about just our country, but I'm talking about any collective. All the collectives are going to fail if we do not address this issue. So that is point one that I thought that this COVID pandemic has taught us. The second thing is that more often than not, we had been looking at collaboration only internationally. So globalization was the key. We had completely stopped looking inwards. I think one of the things that this pandemic has done is that now we need to collaborate even amongst ourselves, so that we can solve problems that we see happening because of the pandemic. We can actually join forces together. We can synergize. Just to give you an example, all the IIMs, including ourselves, we always used to look for partnerships with international institutions. Now, when COVID came in, one of the things that struck me was that Indore happens to be the only city. It has this unique advantage where we have both an IIM and an IIT. And therefore, we joined hands together and we said, let's try and solve problems together, because there are certain technical aspects of the problems that IIT can take care of. And then, of course, there are managerial aspects of the problem that IIMs can take care of. And therefore, by joining hands, so it's like, while you also have a global focus, don't forget the local. And therefore, by joining hands with institutions here within the region itself, we managed to do a lot more for the people around us. So I think that is the second thing that has been taught to us by this pandemic. So these two, to me, are the key lessons.
Absolutely, sir. I think that has been one of the outcomes, and I wanted to build up from that point and ask you, why should businesses really look at responsible business, even from the paradigm of ROI, and how do they really go about measuring this, making sure that this is measurable, goal oriented, and therefore makes every employee a part of success when it comes to responsible business?
Well, Ivor, I have a very strong belief in this. See, ROI may not be the right measure, but I will bring up an example from Titan, which is in the jewelry business, one of the most exploited stakeholders are the karigars, okay? And very bad work conditions, and inhaling toxic fumes, and underpaid, paid by the gram, etc. Now the science that the company applied was to say, one is it's the right thing to do, not buy from these kinds of sources, but having the experience of manufacturing, just redefine jewelry manufacturing with the same karigar by giving him the tools of productivity, by creating an environment which was toxin free. You know what happened? Productivity goes up. The guy earns more money. The company gets per piece at a lower cost per gram, and the customer gets a beautiful piece. So, and this is not CSR. This is just business modeling, just business modeling and doing the right thing. So I would really place this thing as a win-win. You can look it as a win-win-win: customer, stakeholder, company.
Right. Bhaskar, this is so interesting. And I totally agree with you that, even I'm not very comfortable looking at CSR or looking at responsible business from an ROI perspective. I believe that one should look at it purely from a responsibility perspective, which means that you need to do it. We need to look at it from an impact perspective, that you're making an impact. I mean, I had this wonderful example, which I saw with one of the e-com companies. Now, this e-com company during the lockdown, this particular e-com company was looked at as competitor, was looked at as exploiter by the mom and pop stores, because they used to sell grocery, etc. And they used to also deliver groceries, etc. And they were big, obviously. However, what they did during the lockdown period was that they said, hey, we have our people, our personnel who are delivering stuff to the households. And they actually went and approached the mom and pop stores, and they said, if you need to deliver some stuff to any of these houses, we will be delighted to take it. And they actually used their people to deliver the stuff of the mom and pop stores. Now, that to me was the beautiful example of responsible business. Did they get something out of it apart from the goodwill of those mom and pop stores? I don't think so. But they did it. And they did it because in their view, that was the right thing to do at that point of time. And therefore, I would like to look at it purely from an impact assessment point of view. What impact are you really making? And is there some science that you can actually put into measuring that impact?
I think Himanshu has brought up a very, very valuable point, and he mentioned it earlier also. I think COVID has delivered three more C's actually. I think he spoke about cooperation and not competition, between businesses. Yeah, you're competing for the consumer's purse, but you're cooperating on the ground, helping each other, especially when you have infrastructure, which you don't have to rebuild, and you have the people on the ground, and you pick up the, from the mom and pop and deliver is one. So cooperate, not compete, but deliver for the consumer, deliver value to the consumer. I think that is going to be a new paradigm, I feel. Not that you will go out and, embrace your competitor, but you will start talking, look, are we wasting money, unnecessarily duplicating our infrastructures, duplicating many things? Can you share? I understand that capitalism is not, we'll have to rewrite some of these things.
I think it's been a fascinating discussion. And there's so much to learn. And I think especially looking at it from an impact perspective. And again, so as you talked about cooperating, that again is definitely something that I think COVID has brought about. One of the things I wanted to deal with is, while you should be a responsible business for actually doing good, and not just because of ROI considerations, etc. The fact also remains that in many organizations, this becomes like almost like CSR, right? Where you're just ticking off a checkbox because you got to do it, you got to do CSR. So how do you really move, right, from being just check writers to consistent engagement that really tackles the issues that concern India? Like I'll give you an example over here of something that I saw recently. One of the big challenges today is vaccination, and vaccination for poorer people in the 18 plus category. There was a fascinating initiative which was supposed to do this. But again, there are challenges, right, with this, because to get those people, etc. So a check was written for a particular purpose, but ultimately it ended up being just vaccinations for people like you and me, all of us who can afford this vaccine, right? And so what happened was that the poor who were supposed to get it never really got a chance. So how do we ensure that this becomes beyond CSR and beyond just ticking off check boxes? Professor Rai, if you could deal with this issue.
Yeah, Iva, this is a very interesting question that you ask. And I completely agree with you that for many organizations that I have interacted with, it has actually become some kind of an annual activity where you kind of say, okay, 2%, which is a mandatory legal requirement, done, done, done. Are you really making an impact? Are you getting together as an industry to say that, hey, this is something that we can actually solve? And therefore, to me, the answer lies in doing what you are good at. Organizations should look beyond the money aspect of the CSR, and they should try to use their strength to actually contribute towards CSR activities. I'll give you an example by talking about IIM Indore itself. What are we good at? We are good at imparting management education. We are good at problem solving. We are good at helping people make better decisions. Now, if we were to simply write check and say, okay, we are going to contribute to such and such fund to help in COVID, it really does not make sense. Instead, what did we do? We strengthened our research team, and we requested a bunch of faculty to do research on multiple elements of COVID. How would the Indian industry look like after COVID? What can the Indian industry do, different sectors, to actually mitigate the challenges which COVID has thrown towards us? We worked with Apollo Hospitals and with FICCI to actually create the unlockdown strategy for the MSMEs in Madhya Pradesh. We looked at this phenomenon of collective anxiety because we saw that apart from individual anxiety, there was something that was building up during COVID times, and that was collective anxiety. Now, how do we address this challenge of collective anxiety? Now, this is something that we are good at, and therefore, as an IIM, we did this. And subsequently, for example, very recently on the Doctor's Day, 1st of July, I announced on behalf of IIM Indore that we are going to provide free online leadership certificate course to 100 chosen doctors. Now, one may point out the notional monetary value and say, hey, 1.5 crores spent, but I was not looking at the monetary value at all. What I was looking at was that here are a bunch of people who were the frontline workers who actually saved us, who were like our Suraksha Kavach. They did not know that they had their eating times, which went awry. They had their sleep patterns, which went awry. Can we do something about them? And what I realized was that once again, we have to build on our strength. Our strength is to impart education. Our strength is to impart training. And therefore we said, if we can upskill them, perhaps someday it will become useful for them. So this was our way of actually giving back to the doctors who did something. And also, I think this is also the time for the industry to look around and see, is there something that they can actually contribute with? Again, when we looked around, since some of our employees also had to be hospitalized, we saw that there was nobody to actually provide food to the patients in those hospitals. Because people were not allowed. The doctors themselves, the doctors and the medical staff themselves did not have food at times, they skip meals, etc., etc. And therefore, we said, as an IIM, can we do something? And we realized, yes, we have our mess, which is not being fully utilized because not all the students are in the campus. And therefore, we decided, we looked at our capacity and we figured out that we can actually create 200 packets of lunch and 200 packets of dinner. So we identified the hospitals around us, some of the police stations around us, and started delivering and supplying them this food free of cost. And therefore, the moral of the story is, the point I'm trying to make is that instead of simply signing checks, I think companies should look at their core strength and see, can it help the community, either as a collective, which is the organization itself, or as the industry itself, and pick up one or two of those areas where they can collectively contribute rather than spreading thin. So within a sector, some company gives CSR money to one activity, another one gives it to another activity, and therefore the impact is limited. But if all the companies decide together in a particular sector that, look, this seems to be our strength, and therefore we will contribute to this particular activity or to this particular cause, I think we'll have a better assessment, a better impact on the society as well as on the country.
Thank you so much for putting it so well. Now, looking beyond CSR over here, one key element of responsible business is really values, ethics, and integrity, and that is something also that sometimes it seems like we in some sectors, when you see a scam or when you see things that happen, let's say with a bank or with sometimes with large institutions, we feel that sometimes what has gone wrong, right? How do people who again have some of the best education in the world, etc., who had so much of experience, where do they go wrong? So from that perspective of integrity, values, and ethics, Mr. Bhatt, what would you recommend? What do really companies need to do, and what do even maybe Professor Rai can add something as to what even B schools and management schools really need to do to inculcate this at the very core of a person at a very formative stage?
Well, I think if I were to go beyond, how we are brought up at home and all that, I mean, that is one basic need, in society itself. But if I were to take in companies, see, you have to embed it in the form of a code of conduct, okay? And the code of conduct, not just a book which everybody's given on the first day and then there's a quiz, etc. That's the living by the code of conduct is a whole program, where it is not sermonizing. It is not the oldest person in the company comes and gives one lecture, on induction day and talks about, 150 years back, this is what we did. People don't connect. I mean, they emotionally probably respond at that point in time, but practice is always, it is always where the rubber hits the road, at that point in time, how will they act? When your project is coming to a dead halt because the guy on the other side says this, I will sign only if, okay. Now that requires a lot of courage, okay. And the courage is not delivered at the individual level. The corporation has to say no compromise, zero tolerance for anything like this. For example, in Titan, we encourage people to accept a gift because in India, this gifting is a societal act. That guy feels bad if but you accept the gift, but tell the guy, look, I'm not expected to, but this will go into an auction tomorrow in the company, and the proceeds of that auction will go towards an orphanage. It's a very big thing, So people are not ashamed, or, they're not, they take, like in public, a showroom opening, people give you a shawl or something like that, So now these are, in a way, let's say, novel ways of dealing with the same subject. And the other is, in companies now, people make films out of anecdotes which have led to a certain act of commission or omission. And there are, the newsletters cover it. But more importantly, in some companies, skits have been created. Skits are played out on, let's say, sexual harassment and so on. And then what happens is the public looks at it as entertainment and then says, my God, you mean it happened in our company? And then there is discussion. So it's a journey, but it's not easily solvable. Where there is selfish desire for, unjust enrichment, it is very difficult, because people will find shortcuts, and therefore your ability to catch them, your systems of watching have to be very sharp. It's only becoming better and better, but so are the people who are crossing the line. They are getting smarter and smarter.
So this is very interesting, Bhaskar, because to me also there was this personal moment of epiphany when I realized how important this particular discourse of responsible leadership was. So when I came into academia in 2006, apart from negotiation, in 2005, apart from negotiation, which happens to be my bread and butter subject, I was talking about leadership, and our standard definition of leadership in social sciences used to be that leadership is a process by which a person influences others to accomplish an objective and directs the organization in a way that makes it more cohesive and coherent. And I was very thrilled that great definition, all encompassing. To me, two things happened which really were the moment of reckoning for me. One was that I would tell my participants this definition, and then I would ask them to name a leader who matched that definition. And the first time the penny dropped for me was when people mentioned the usual people like Mahatma Gandhi, like Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, J.R.E. Tata, and then somebody would mention Hitler, or somebody would mention Osama bin Laden. And I started wondering what's wrong with these people. But then when I looked at the definition, I realized that there was something wrong with the definition, because these people did match that definition. They were leaders according to that definition. And therefore, I started looking at what did this definition lack. And what I realized was that there were two things which are lacking in this definition. One was justice. What is justice? What is fairness? And the second was a complete absence of a moral compass about the difference between the right and the wrong. So that, and then obviously when I started looking at the world of business, I also realized that the first decade of this century itself was a moment of reckoning for us. Starting in 2001, Enron, 2008, where you had the subprime crisis in the United States because of the greed of few. And then of course, our own 2008, we had our own Satyam scam, which shaved off 0.4% of the GDP in India. And that's when, as an academic and as an institution, the part of the institution that I was, a part of, we started working on what should leadership look like? How should the discourse on leadership change? And what changed was that we brought in these two elements and we said leadership needs to have this thing that you and I, in fact, spoke about it even before we came on this show, and that is integrity. Integrity is extremely important, and it has to find a place so far as the discourse and the definition of leadership is concerned. And integrity itself has been looked at in multiple ways by people. People say that walk your talk, and that's integrity. But I would like to look at it from a slightly deeper perspective. To me, integrity is manasa vacha karmana. So you must say what you mean, and then you must do what you say. So that is the first thing, that your thoughts, your words, and your deeds, all three of them have to be in consonance. And the second element of integrity, as I look at, is that your thoughts, words, and deeds should be for a collective good rather than an individual good. It should not be focused on self-serving interests. And the moment we bring this in, now, as you rightly pointed out, it has to be actually imbibed. So we can't have a separate course called ethics or responsible business and then believe that we are done with it so far as a business institution is concerned. What we do here, for example, at IIM Indore is we talk about ethic in each and every course. We talk about the ethical dilemmas that might arise in each and every course, in each and every topic that we actually deal with, apart from, of course, having a separate course which tries to delineate and differentiate between morality and ethics, because a lot of time people tend to confuse between these two. And I keep telling them that, look, morality is something which is given to you by another collective. Maybe your religion talks about good and bad, your community talks about what is good and bad, but we have to talk about ethics. What is good in a given situation? What is right in a given situation? What is wrong in a given situation? And that, I believe, what we have started doing is we have started putting that as a part of the case method that we follow, where we talk about these ethical dilemmas that people face, and we help our students and participants understand, how do you navigate this area of gray? This is not black or white. This is a gray area. Now, how do you navigate through that area of gray? And therefore, I believe it's extremely important that all business schools now include that as a part of their curriculum, not in form of just one subject or one elective, but make it as a part of each and every course of each and every program in everything that they do. And that is where I think leadership becomes extremely important, and the way you actually exhibit leadership also becomes extremely important.
Well, this is really fascinating, and I think we can spend hours more on this. But we're running out of time, and I just wanted to deal with two quick points before we close. The first one really is about technology. Now, in many of these areas, whether it's in measuring, whether it's in even rooting out corruption, etc., and I think again over there, technology has played a role even in the nation, right, bringing in greater transparency, etc. So, what can you tell us, Professor Rai, about technology and how it can be used to create a more inclusive society in India, which offers opportunities to more people and which also perhaps offers opportunities to solve social issues using technology?
So, Ivor, this is interesting because once again, there is a dichotomy here. Technology is an enabler. And therefore, we can always use technology to bring in more transparency into our system. So for example, if we put all our processes online, let's say all the contract processes of the government, let's say every process by virtue of which you award a particular project, etc., it makes things more transparent. And obviously, therefore, it gives everyone an equal opportunity to participate. Likewise, if we go for online education, we are in some ways democratizing education, because we are reaching out to far more people, we are making education more accessible, and therefore we can use technology as an enabler. We can also solve problems by using technology. So for example, one of the things that we at IIM Indore did was that we said we are going to solve at least one problem that our community around us faces. It could be the city of Indore, it could be the state of MP, or it could be our country. And therefore, the first problem that we solved when I took over the charge as a director was the traffic problem of Indore. Because, when I was driving in from the Indore airport to our campus, I realized that the traffic was a mess. And we used technology for that because we did not obviously have access to a lot of things. So we used the imagery of the Google satellite, and thereby, by using the imagery of the Google satellite, we looked at what the traffic situation was at different points of day, at different points of geographical locations within the city, and then we solved this problem. And that obviously is going to help everybody. So by this, we can create a more transparent, a more equal society, a more equal city, a more equal state, a more equal country. However, there is a dichotomy, as I said, and that is the digital divide. When we do all of this, we assume that people have access to technology. Now, this is one thing that I realized, this COVID has taught us many, many things. To me, the biggest lesson that I learned as an individual and as an institutional head was that of compassion. I'll give you a very small example, Ivor and Bhaskar. You'll understand where I am coming from. When the lockdown happened, students went back to their homes. It took us just 1 week to move from offline teaching to online teaching because we had the wherewithal. What we did not realize was that while we were, thumping our, giving a pat on our back, saying that how quickly did we move into an online mode and now we are going to provide education to everyone. What we did not realize was that all our students did not have the access. Some of the students were living in far-flung areas. They did not have the bandwidth to actually access classes. Some of the students came from a background where equipment needed to be shared because you had everyone working from home. Some of my students did not have big enough homes where parents are also working from home, where other siblings are also working from home, to find a quiet corner from where they can access classes. And therefore, while technology helps in democratizing, we also need to understand that there is a digital divide. There is a divide in terms of access, and that inequity is something that we need to address through some more innovative methods. So the moment we realized that, we said, okay, one of the things that we can do is we have to make these classes accessible to the students, not merely as an online synchronous mode, but even in the asynchronous mode, so that whenever they have the bandwidth, they can once again look at those classes, download the relevant material, and then at least learn. So I think this is one thing that we need to learn, that while we can use technology, we have to be very careful while jumping to the conclusion that technology can solve it all.
So I think I want to add on one more point here. I think we are missing out, and I'm just guessing. Okay, I'm not saying this is now a very big movement. COVID and pre-COVID, society, individuals, just citizens coming together and delivering service has become a very big thing. I would take the big example of groups like Pan IIT, where alumni got together as individuals and have brought their abilities to deliver skilling and things like that. My own batch from IIM Ahmedabad created Impact. Impact it is called. It's a group. It's an NGO, but delivering education to those uneducated, because the primary education, they haven't even gone through primary. So creating learning centers across the country. And what he said, if you have purpose, money will flow. So they had a purpose, they had a model, and a lot of companies now, including SBI and a whole lot of trusts, are supporting that. So a new movement has started, if you ask me, of not just responsible business, responsible institutions, but groups of individuals coming together, like-minded, and feeling that they also need to deliver to society in their own way, either in their own community or using their skills or using their network,
Well, gentlemen, it's been a fascinating conversation, but I really need to bring it to an end because we've far run out of time. But I'm sure this has been such a fascinating conversation. People really won't mind this because there's so much to learn over here, so much to look at with a new look at responsible business with a whole new lens. Because I think the way we've seen it earlier, perhaps from just the lens of CSR or just the lens of doing something because you have to. I think what this entire environment has done, what the pandemic, of course, has done, has brought about disruption, but has also brought about so much of change, and which is, I think, and which, as Mr. Bhatt, as you so eloquently put it, right? I think there's a whole new generation of responsible businesses that are emerging. So many new solutions, and I think all of this, I think, despite the tragedies that have happened, I think there's so much to look forward to in India Incorporated when it comes to responsible business. Thank you so much, both of you gentlemen, for defining the issues, for providing solutions, for providing examples of companies that are getting it right, and for providing frameworks for leaders to look at responsible in whole new ways. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you once again for your time.